Mhm.
Right. And most recently, he played the brightest, reddest character on stage with one of the best voices you will hear anywhere around. And he played Sebastian the Crab in The Little Mermaid. Yusef has played exciting and varied roles at other theaters, including playing Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet, Sir Toby Belch in Twelfth Night, Orestes in Electra, and Audrey II in Little Shop of Horrors. He's an actor, a singer, a dancer, a choreographer, a director, as well as so many other things beyond the scope of theater. He teaches voice and speech as well as movement in PCPA's Acting Conservatory. He is a sparkling force of nature. He is my colleague and friend. He is the one and only Yusef Seevers. Hi, Yusef. What can
Wow.
we expect tonight, and what do you hope that we'll take away with us?
Wow, that was a wonderful introduction, Kitty. I didn't know about that part, y'all. So that was new for me to hear as well. Um, First, I want to take a moment to thank all of you all for being here, and to breathe with me, just to kind of settle ourselves into this virtual world of learning and experiencing, which is, not what we most would prefer, but it's what we got right now. So it's what we should cherish and revere in some way. So wherever you are, go ahead and take a deep breath. I invite you to take a deep breath and just it's like settle into where you are today. So my intention with this work and what you can expect is really to get your appetite started. My intention really is to leave you with an appetite for truth about why Black theater is different, why it was created, and what purpose it serves. And so I hope all of your questions are not answered. And I wish that things that we discuss here spark further conversations and encourage you to question yourself and investigate all your actions in a brand new way, and I know that's a huge thing to talk about in two-part series, but nonetheless, I think we can at least start it, and that's really what it's always about, is starting every day, starting fresh, starting new, starting over, wherever you are that best serves you. So with that, I think I'm going to dive right in. Yeah, am I good to go, Kitty?
You're good. You take it.
Off we go. So the first question I have, the format of this is really a discussion. And our primary mode of communication is going to be through the chat, just to kind of deal with audio dancing. And so I encourage you all to get familiar with thoughts that happen, things that occur, and allow yourself to put them in the chat, because this is more about your ability to have this dialogue. We're not going to answer everything you've ever thought, and we're not going to cover every insecurity or strength or all the things you wish we would talk about. We really only have 50 minutes, And so I encourage you to leave the questions there for yourself, and also leave the questions there for the group within the chat. And the first question I have for all of you, which I would love for you to think about and then actually answer, is why are you here? What you here for? Even if it is because my workplace has put this event on and I show up to all my workplace events, or if it's because you're my son and I come to all the things that you do, or you know what I mean, or my friend told me about it, but I really want to identify as best we can the reason why you bring yourself to this information, because in that reasoning, we can start to investigate your own desires and the clarity or lack thereof about what this is and why you're here. So I'll leave a few minutes for things like that to roll into the chat. And I really want to know, be as honest as you can. There are no wrong answers. No one going to say, how dare you say that? That's not how I run my classes. And another reason why I have people identify this to some degree is that often you can discover your real intentions about things and your real curiosity and where those curiosities come from. And so through this, you'll hear ideas and thoughts and phrases about Black culture, about Black plays and playwrights, and also talking about color. Our big thing is going to be about the polarizing of color and the power of colorism and where those things come from and how they started to take shape in things like Black theater and how we tell stories and what stories we tell, actually. Yes, these are lovely. English teachers in the house, interested, yes, hear, learn, expand, curiosity, deeper. Just, oh, thank you. Because I miss live theater, absolutely. My own understanding and perspective, yes, let these keep rolling in. And then it may change, because I'll be talking about things that may prick you in a way in which you were not planning for, in a way in which you could not plan for, really, that may cause things to change and may cause your investigation to deepen or even change a little bit. To know what I know, what I don't know. That's a good one. That's a really good one, to know what I don't know. The plays that will be, the playwrights that we'll be discussing are Ntozake Shange and August Wilson. Those are the two that I'm really going to stick with just for this class. And I'll tell you all, I didn't tell Kitty I was going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this. When we first started talking about this class, I pitched a 10-class series. They were like, what should we do? And I was like, I got 10 classes, 200 years of context, baby, let's go. And they were like, let's shape it a little bit more. And I think that that's a totally wonderful way to do it. I was trained in the school of fashion, like we kind of sort of drown you and then teach you how to swim, but in this way, we get to whet your appetite and get you desiring more, which I think is also a beautiful way to go about things like this. And so, keeping with, I would 100, yeah, go ahead, Kitty.
People saying, hey, we want all 10.
Yeah, I know, right? Screenshot them things, okay?
Yeah, working on that.
Screenshot that and y'all know where to send them. So, the first question I have for you all in this discussion is, what was the first play you saw with people of color in it? I'll repeat that again. What was the first play you saw with people of color in it, and maybe what was their role? Just take a few minutes to think about it. It could be, a TV play or a movie play. The first play you saw with people of color in it, meaning on the stage, like you saw them up there with costumes on. The Wiz, Pirates of Penzance, Little Shop of Horrors, okay. Lion King, Judas and Jesus Christ, Ragtime, Christmas Carol, Porgy and Bess, Raisin in the Sun. Lovely, 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 lovely. Once on This Island, Fences Pippin, Beautiful. And so as these continue to come in, the second question I would love for you all to think about and just see if you can get a grip on is, what was the first play you saw where the context of the story was of color? The story that they were telling was of a color historical background, belonging to people of color, not participating, like say a play where you see a Black person playing a maid is different than a play or a musical like Ragtime, And so think about the first one you saw where the story and the context of the play was about people of color. And the one reason why I like these in the comments is that it gives everybody a chance to see where everybody is, and it does it in the safety of the mute zone where you can feel free to respond and also understand and be shocked as much as you would like. And the reason why, does someone have a question? Okay, no. So the reason why I bring these things up is there's this concept of tokenism, and there's a concept of amplification. There's also the concept of being in the world and not being of the world. And so with Black theater and Black people in relationship to Western theater, there's often been this either tokenizing or amplification, or there's been this in the world, but they are not of the world, meaning they are a participant, but they do not own it, or they are not a part of it. You know what I mean? They are a spoke on the wheel, if you will. And so I bring that up because small differences like that, someone's unmuted. Could you mute Kitty or someone with host powers? Because in this continuum of telling Black stories and changing Black stories and amplifying these narratives, we must understand what are the contexts of these stories. And so bringing a play to the table that has, 2 Black characters that are servants in them is not necessarily a story you want to tell. but bringing a play to the table that has context that amplifies and represents the Black experience in a way that is not traditional is something you might want to consider. And so just to really understand what it means to be in the world and not of the world, and knowing it when it comes up and being able to counteract those impulses. The next topic I want to talk about, and then I'll ask another question for you all, is this concept of colorism. There's a gentleman by the name of Willie Lynch. I don't know if many of you know who this is, but this is a gentleman who popularized and marketed the production of what it means to make a slave and what it means to utilize your cattle in a way that best serves the economy. And so what I'm going to point to is a couple pillars, cardinal principles is what he calls them, for making a Negro. Okay, I'll just go through. There's 6 of them. And please breathe as you hear these things. I have to remind myself, because this is something that is very potent to talk about now, but it's something that has been my life experience for a very, very long time. I've played more white men than Black men my entire theatrical experience, you know, and that is a part of how this goes, and also is a symptom of things like this. So these 6 cardinal principles: both horse and nigger are no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. For the orderly futures, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and young offspring. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and division of labor. Both must be taught to respond to a particular new language. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. And so that last one about psychological containment really introduces the polarizing of color. And what Willie Lynch did was he taught slave owners that this works better for your dollars if you put the dark ones against the light ones, the tall ones against the short ones. And not just in how you talk about them or to them, but how they are treated and how they are seen amongst one another. And so this brings into something that somebody like August Wilson, who writes Fences, and you see Fences, right? And Troy is this powerful image of a Black man, and he has this son named Corey, who's usually a light-skinned person. And you would see this storyline, and from an audience perspective, it's a dynamic conversation between 2 individuals, right? And also, to a person like me who sees something like this, I see the dynamic relationship between a light-skinned person and a dark-skinned person, and the perpetuation of that obligation to let you know who's top dog. These themes and concepts come from this dehumanization of one to another. And so I'm going to read text from 3 different plays, and I'll call it the listen and reflect, because I'm going to put up the images of the playwrights as I read these words, because I want you to learn from their images while you listen and partner with the words that I'm sharing, and hear them through this lens, given the things that we have now talked about. The question I have for you all is, can anybody tell me the difference between tokenism and amplification? What do you think the difference is between tokenizing people of color and amplifying people of color? And it's okay if you don't know, because to some degree it is a very thin line. Tokenism, you flatten the 3-dimensionality of the human. Tokenism is just having someone for a representation versus amplification, which is telling their story. Tokenism is using BIPOC individuals to forward your own platform. Amplification is giving a platform for their voice and their stories is centered. And I'd love to hear from, there are 48 people on this call. Take a shot. This is a discussion, you know, this is a discussion, and yeah, it's not in the room across the table in voices, but I do want you all to practice grasping these concepts and being able to do so in a stable, comfortable, and conversational way, so that when you have these conversations out in the world, BIPOC, for those of you that don't know, are Black, Indigenous people of color. But this is really about your stability and amplifying your flexibility with these kind of conversations. Tokenism is a prompt, yes. So, and I bring this up because this polarizing of color has always been attached to money. It's always been attached to the economy. The slave trade was attached to the economy. And so there are money things that even now to this day control the amplification, the amount of work, and the amount of effort one is willing to put in order to even the scale or bring us to ground zero, as it were. And that simply means that if you're not willing to spend the money or do the work in order to make these things happen, your intentions are not deep. Your concern is not profound if you are not willing to spend the money and commit the time and do the work to change these systems. And that's okay. It's okay, because you are also taught to value the dollar more than the human body, especially one that does not look like you. And so it's really, really important to understand that these concepts and things are things you want to discuss actively with your family, with yourself and your peers, and not try to shy away from them because they're uncomfortable. And so that's my half-hour section of this conversation. And what I would love to do now is, again, take one of those collective breaths where we all acknowledge that we are breathing people. And check in with how you feel. See if you've started to tighten up. See if your shoulders are a little bit higher, if you're uncomfortable in your seat, or if you find that there is no stillness. Start to notice those things as well. And what I'd like to do now, Kitty, is go to the first slide. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you this playwright's name, and I want you to tell me, those of you who don't know who this person is, I want you to tell me the first impression. You can go to the second slide. The first impression of this name. Would you say that this is a dark skin or a light skinned person? And if you didn't know who this person was, what would you assume? I know for some of you that can be hard to dissociate who you already know this person to be, but those of you who have never heard this name before, what's your first impression? What does the color of this person look like to you? Yes. Yes. What would just be your intuitive assumption? And I know sometimes it can be hard to allow yourself to do that, but I think in investigating our assumptions, we find out our habits. We found out what we really are inclined to do right away. Dark skin, non-European ancestry, yes. Dark skin, Dark complexion, Great, Katie, can you go to the next one? So for color girls who've considered suicide when the rainbow is enough is the play that Ntozake Shange wrote. What is the title of this play? What does the title of this play tell you? What does the title of this play make you feel? Simply from reading it. And I'm not talking about what is the right answer. I'm not talking about what you're supposed to do. I'm talking about what is your natural inclination. And there's nothing to be ashamed of in your natural inclination, but it is something worth identifying. Frustration, trauma, sadness, ache, poetry, heavy trauma. Great. And Kitty, can you go to the image, please? So that is Ntozake Shange. Okay. And for those of you who might have thought she was dark-skinned or from, a Nigerian background. These are the kind of things that names, images, colors, and our impression start to play out in ways we don't know, in ways that we can't really tell. And the reason I love Black theater is that it's pretty cut and dry. You know, like I really love that some of the context in these plays and in these stories are really, really powerful. But they're not powerful in an American sense. They're powerful in the sense of what it means to be a person of color in America, what it means to be a person of color and say these words, to identify these concepts rather than just being a victim to these concepts. So the first piece that I'm going to read from for Color Girls is Lady in Brown. And I would love for you to just kind of close your eyes and just listen. Listen to the words. And I write down things, words, or anything that starts to happen or that you begin to feel as this washes over you. Lady in Brown. Dark phases of womanhood, of never having been a girl. Half notes scattered, without rhythm, no tune. Distraught laughter fallen over a Black girl's shoulder. It's funny, it's hysterical. The melodylessness of her dance. Don't tell nobody, don't tell a soul. She's dancing on beer cans and shingles. This must be the spook house. Another song with no singers, lyrics, no voices, and interrupted solos, unseen performances. Are we ghouls? Children of horror? The joke? Don't tell nobody, don't tell a soul. Are we animals? Have we gone crazy? I can't hear anything but maddening screams and the soft strains of death. And you promised me somebody, anybody, sing a Black girl song. Bring her out to know herself, to know you, but sing her rhythms, carry and struggle, hard times, sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed in silence so long, she doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without a rhythm, no tune. Sing her sighs, sing the song of her possibilities. Sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born and handled warmly. That's delicious. So hearing this text, what are things that jump out at you? What does it mean to hear? Where's this line? Are we ghouls, children of horror, the joke? This must be the spook house. And if you don't know what spooks is a derogatory term that was used against Black people in the days of Jim Crow. And so you would say, you know, there's a spook over there, or the spook house is down, or the spook neighborhood. And these are people of color saying these words. And how does it feel to tell this story being on the sharp side of the blade of these words? And to do that publicly, to do that for money, to do that commercially, over and over and over and over again. And Kitty, you can click the next transition on this slide. So Ntozake died in 2018. And so it's really important that as these legendary people and these legendary stories begin to occur, that we think about our relationship and our duty to do more work. And for those of you that don't know this, there's always been a disproportionate amount of work to do with any person of color, anything dealing with the race, color, inequality. There's always a disproportionate amount of work. And I know growing up, I was told and taught and memorized that I had to be 3 times as good as anybody else to be considered normal. That was the standard. That's what they tell children. And so do you know what it means to be brought up in a world in which your less than-ness is a part of the welcome kit. You must be 3 times what you are in order to be considered normal. That's common rhetoric, and it's still not surprising. And children are still taught these things because these systems will not evaporate. They don't disappear because one of you decides to do things the right way. You know, but it takes you investigating your words, investigating your choice of words and the way that you communicate with people about these same issues. Okay, so Katie, can you go to the next slide, please? August Wilson. I'm sure many of you know this name, but what do you think the color of this person's skin is? What's your first thought? It's okay to assume. I give you the environment to make an assumption about what the color of this person's skin might be. I know for me, when before I had ever saw August Wilson, I had no idea. And I made an assumption that was incorrect, but it was my assumption based off the context of his stories. Beautiful. And Kitty, can you click the next slide or the next transition? So the 2 plays I'm going to be reading selections from are Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. These are both pretty iconic plays and both pretty early in his canon. He's written a 10-play series that I suggest you look into that would be a larger part of this conversation. I have to tell y'all, I had to be under the fire to keep this thing under an hour. I'm gonna tell you, I was writing this stuff. I was like, Yusef, we can't go down that road. We only got 50 minutes. Yusef, we can't go down this road. We only got 50 minutes. And to set the appetite for these kind of things, you really have to massage them into place because our defense mechanisms and our habitual safety patterns will keep us from having the vulnerable conversation, because you'd rather be seen as a person who doesn't make assumption than to speak about what your actual first impulse is. It's human to have those things, and it's also human to acknowledge them. So Kitty, next transition, please. So August Wilson is a light-skinned gentleman. Where do we pre-order? Good question. So August Wilson was a light-skinned individual. I was surprised when I found this information. I did a research paper on him when I was in grad school. And before that, I had like looked him up one day. And when I saw him, he was kind of like Tom Joyner. If anybody's from the Midwest, you know, and you like hear Tom Joyner on the radio, you're like, oh, that's a cool guy, you know. But when I think about him, he seems like a medium brown, you know what I mean, or a dark brown. And when I hear August Wilson's words, I see, you know, pitch black, strong, you know what I mean? Like tall, bulky, no eyebrows, bald head, you know what I'm saying? Like I see a really, really clear image in my mind. And it was so delicious to find that this context and these stories were capsulized and crystallized by a gentleman on the opposite end of that spectrum. I thought that was just so powerful for me to run into. And also, I also think for him and Intozake, it put them in a position to have more power and to do more things and to be seen in more things than to say somebody like Viola Davis or Nina Simone. You know, like the way that they are amplified visually also speaks about the colorism in this world and the way things are set. So the first piece that I'm going to read is from Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. This was a play that I fell in love with after as an afterthought. Like I didn't plan on loving on Ma Rainey like I do now, but the depth of this story and the truth told in this story, it's not very popular, but I also think that it's very poignant. Toledo is one of the characters in the same line with Ma Rainey. He is under no delusion about the fierceness, the ferocity, and the truth about what it is to live in America. And what's unfortunate, I would say, but also sort of fortunate, is that if you get it quicker, you can figure out how to make it work for you. And you can also be in the place to have the conversation to make the changes. Because we'll talk about it when we get to Fences. There's this power dynamic with money and race that becomes hard for those who suffer from this dynamic to approach it. So I'll say this, for example, it's harder for a person of color to ask for a raise than it is a person who's not of color. It's harder for a person to fight a person of color to have a budget, to understand their taxes, to even like money, than it is for somebody who's never had to suffer at getting their water turned off or their parents going bankrupt, you know what I mean? Or being on the poorer or ghetto side of things. So this speech I'm going to read is from Toledo, and it's a big one, not a big one, but it's pretty poignant and it's pretty right on. And so as you listen to this, I encourage you to listen to the transparency and try not to get lost in the image, but to just listen to the message of what he's saying. Now, I'm going to show you how this goes. Were you just a leftover from history? Everybody comes from different places in Africa, right? Come from different tribes and things. Soon a while, they began to make one big stew. You had the carrots, the peas, and potatoes and whatnot over here. And over there, you had the meat, the nuts, the okra, corn. And then you mix it up. You let it cook right through to get the flavors flowing together. And then you got one thing. You got a stew. Now, you take and eat the stew. You take and make your history with that stew. All right? Now, it's over. Your history's over, and you done ate the stew already. But you look around and you see some carrots over here and some potatoes over there. That stew still there. You done made your history and it's there. You can't eat it all. So what you got? You got some leftovers. That's what it is. You got leftovers and you can't do nothing with it. You already making you another history, cooking you another meal, and you don't need them leftovers no more. What to do? See, we's the leftovers. The colored man is the leftovers. Now, who knows that? You find me a nigga that knows that, and I'll turn which way you want me to. I'll bend over for you. You ain't gonna find that. And that's what the problem is. The problem ain't with the white man. The white man knows you just a leftover because he the one who's done eating and he know what he done ate. But we don't know that we've been took and made history out of, done went and filled the white man's belly, and now he's full and tired and wants you to get out of the way and let him be by himself. Now I know what I'm talking about. And if you want to find out, you just ask Mr. Irvin what he had for supper yesterday. And if he is an honest white man, which is asking for a whole heap of a lot, he'll tell you what he done ate your black ass. And if you please, I'm full up with you. So go on and get off my plate and let me eat something else. Whew. So what does it feel like to hear these words through this lens of this conversation? To hear a person of color identify and justify the slant of this system, to say that there's nothing wrong with the one who built it, but it's those of us who don't get it. And so that's what makes these plays more than plays. Because this is the story of every Black person in this country who's ever decided to put their finger on the pulse and understand what this country was built off of and how we got to where we are. And it should feel, and that's okay. It's okay for it to feel, you know, but understand that if you are a person in power that is of a Caucasian history or background, you, to some degree, have benefited from our sustaining of your system. Because we justify Willie Lynch's rules because they work so well and are 100 years deep. Because we justify the system, you are above reprieve. Because it's up to us to deal with, right? It's up to us to do things the way you want them to be done. to be able to say these words is an extreme place of power. And if you don't feel it, then you are numb, which is okay. It's all right to hear those words and go, I didn't feel a doggone thing. Or it sounds like the last time we did this play or something like that. But it really does beg you, call you to listen closely and to listen to what these stories are teaching you. They're not just plays on stage. You know what I mean? Like these as much as they seem fictional, I know that guy. I know that guy. I went to school with that guy and I rode a bus with that dude. That's what makes these plays different. You know, and coming from a group of people that are working nonstop in order to bring this conversation to the forefront in a way that is not marketized or in a way that is not strictly for your bottom dollar, but in a way that moves you to allow us to be at the table in a way that is equal without justification. My goodness. So next I'm going to read a section of Fences. This is from Troy. This is a very, very famous monologue, but it really brings the conversation of race and economics to a head in better than most speeches. And then I'll wrap this up with a few ideas and things to kind of amp us up for round two. Because in part two, we're going to jump a little more forward to talk about how things like slave play, how things like choir boys, what's that play? Emily, you know this play. I can't think of it. I'll come back to it. Current plays, more recent plays, how this narrative has changed and also ways in which it's been dramatized or satirized in ways to make it more palatable to people. But this monologue is from Fences by Troy in Act 1. Like you, I go out here every morning, bust my butt, putting up with them crackers every day because I like you. You about the biggest fool I ever saw. It's my job. It's my responsibility. You understand that? A man has got to take care of his family. You live in my house, you sleep, you're behind on my bedclothes, fill your belly up with my food because you my son, my flesh and blood, not because I like you, because it's my duty to take care of you. I owe a responsibility to you. Let's get this straight right here. Before we go along any further, I ain't got to like you. Mr. Rand don't give me my money come payday because he like me. He give me my money because he owe me. I didn't give you everything I had to give you. I gave you your life. Me and your mama worked that out between us. And liking your black ass wasn't a part of the bargain. Don't you try to go through life worrying about if somebody like you or not. You best be making sure they doing right by you. You understand what I'm saying, boy? So, what do you hear in that speech? What do you hear in that speech? I hear duty. I hear responsibility. I hear payday. Mm-hmm. 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 Lovely. And so what makes this powerful, I believe, is that it really amplifies what duty means, what obligation versus inspiration means, what what part money plays in the dynamic between you and a loved one. And I find it to be quite paralyzing in some way to know that these things are tied to the dollar, to know that your effort to take care of another is out of obligation rather than care, rather than desire. And these are not things that were rewarded to this community as perspective. They were not given the perspective to view things this way. If you go back to Willie Lynch's letter, the system is very clear. If you don't look like me, you are my enemy, period. And that don't matter if you're darker than me, it don't matter if you're lighter than me. If you do not fight or raise the same flag than I do, then you are a problem. And this is between father and son. This is between father and son. And mind you, I know that there is love somewhere in these words. But when you hear these words, and when Corey receives these words, what could he feel? Question mark, question mark. And how does that cause him to operate? How does that cause him to look at the world? If you say to my face, as a bringer in this world, you brought me into this world and you ain't got to like me. Awesome. How does that shape my view of the world? How does that shape my view of authority? You know, it robs us of the view that we have to like one another, or we get to like one another. And so there's a couple things that my favorite person, James Baldwin, talks about that I think are important. And it's, we are trying to forge a new identity in which we need each other. Because until we recognize what has brought us to this point, there is very slim hope for this dream of a new world. If you are not willing to recognize the habits you don't want to shine a light on, or the perspective you are afraid of voicing, there is very slim hope for this new world, because the people who are denied participation in this world, simply by you not willing to change, or simply by you not willing to look at things a different way, some people are denied participation. I dare you to look at every table you sit at, henceforth and forevermore, and see how many people are there that do not look like you. And bring it up every time until it's annoying. You know, because the people who are denied participation in this world, by virtue of their presence, they will wreck it. Every single time. It's James Baldwin, 1965. And so our work is to support the inspiration for change. Truly, truly, truly. And as I said, my intention with this whole class is to really just get you wanting to learn more. Because this, you know, and this is coming from a person who, my parents are here so they can speak to this, but I have my free papers in my house, in my dining room, with the last name that was given to me by people who owned my people, period. And so that gap between what was and what is was this big for me, which puts me in a place to have this conversation with you now. But I really, really encourage you that, like, do not let up on this stuff. Do not let up on it. Because most of us are in a place where you could let up, and you could not talk about it, and you could veer onto things that may be more pressing or a little more distracting or easier to talk about. But when I offered this class, I knew I was putting my shit at risk. Oops, I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss, but you know, it is what it is. But I knew I was putting my heart at risk for things like that. Because this is not easy, as it were, to talk about. This is not fun, you know, but it's a conversation that must be had in as many public places as possible. Yeah, 8-second delay. Of course. So this whole thing, and in part two, we're going to dig a little bit more, and I might have some people actually come in and read some scenes for us. And Kitty, you can get rid of the slides. I might have some people come in and read some scenes for us, because I do think that the act of storytelling and seeing people tell these stories really does change the way they feel, and really does change the way you receive them, and allows you to see yourself in ways that just reading a book don't. You know, and these plays and these words are meant to be brought to life in very, very dynamic ways. So this is just a glimpse, as it were, to looking in places that you have seen before, but looking at them in a different way, looking at them in a way that challenges what you are comfortable with. If you get to go through this stuff easy, you're not looking in the right place, period. If this is a smooth sail and you're just lining up all the things you can and can't do, then this is not the conversation you're supposed to be having. And if you feel I'm wrong, come talk to me. We can have a conversation about that. Because it's the truth. It's the truth. And it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna prick you. It's gonna be uncomfortable. And it's gonna happen again and again and again and again. So Kitty, I would love to stop the recording so people can unmute themselves and share, but that's the lesson plan for today, in terms of the plays I want to talk about, the stories I want to amplify, and the themes, ideas, and concepts. I want you to now ponder between amplification and tokenism, and doing it out of obligation rather than doing it out of concern or inspiration, and what it means to see color rather than ignore color. Don't ignore it. You can't ignore it. It's like ignoring a door. You'll walk right into it. See me. See her. And enjoy seeing. It's a privilege to see and to be able to be seen. So thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you all. Katie, can you stop the recording?